Hey guys, today I'm here with Arthelon, the former mid of several teams, including TBD. How's it going, Arthelon?
It's going pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm going. It's going well for me too. Thanks for asking. So the first place I'd like to start is I noticed that on Leaguepedia it said that you originally began playing in 3v3s. Is this true?
Oh no, I think when the person was making that, I just said, well, my first games I was like level one. I was playing Twisted Tree Line, so I think they
Oh,
misinterpreted that.
okay, yeah. It seemed to make you out as a pretty competitive threes player, so I think I'm gonna skip over that
Oh
for
no, I
now.
hate threes.
Okay, sounds good. So, you've played through several. You've played with several teams during your time trying to climb up in the challenger scene. Could you tell us a bit about some of the teams you played on, like Ordinance or Fidelis, or like those teams?
Yeah, I played on like a bunch of random teams. This is back in like season two, so there's a bunch of like teams that you basically just make friends with. Ordinance, I think we won like two go for rolls. It didn't last that long though. I was shortly on MME, the B team, as their mid player, but that didn't really last long either. And then I think my first big debut was on a Meat Playground.
Um, I actually wanted to ask a little bit about your time on Ordinance first. It said that on Wikipedia's claim that Sneaky, who is now on Cloud9, was the AP mid. Is that true?
Sneaky. See, this is I don't really remember this time. Like I think we had oh, I don't think it was Sneaky. I think it was who was the guy Spellsy. I think that was
The one
Spellsy
who makes the
actually.
infographics now.
Yeah.
What was it? What was it even like being a player in that time period of season two, back when like things weren't as well established? Like, what was the experience like?
Well, there wasn't very many tournaments. There was only like Go for LOL. There was TSM invites. I think that was basically it. Like I said, you didn't really practice that much. It was just you got five people together and you played. So
A lot of people think that the season two organization was better. Do you think that right now, like as a pro player, do you have a better time playing right now or before?
I think the challenger scene's a lot better. But I do like how the points system works in season two for the top teams because it depends on it mattered a lot more to win tournaments and there was more tournaments to do instead of just one big long season in LCS. So I like that aspect about it better.
All right, so then I wanted to talk about Meat Playground, which was when you kind of first broke in the scene as like to be known as a mid laner, and you were really well known for playing Elise mid at the time. Could you talk a bit about that?
I think Elise Mid was after it, but yeah, I Meat Playground they had it was X Hazard, Inica Inc, Cobelter, Balls, and Lemon God. Or not Balls. It was Altec first, but me and Balls replaced Pobelter and Altec because they were too young to do the relegation tournament. So we stepped in. We unfortunately didn't qualify, but it was really fun because I got to go out to California for the first time, and it was I got to show my parents, that League was actually something that you could get stuff out of, and it was just not me playing, mindlessly for so long.
Back then, Balls was an 80 carry player, right?
Yeah, he was. He
Uh,
played 80 carry for that, and then afterwards he like switched to top lane almost immediately. So,
was he any good as AD?
oh yeah, he was really good. It was mostly just me and him trying to. We were like the shining stars of that team, I guess, but fortunately, no, we didn't qualify. But yeah, he was very good as AD. His mechanics were very on par with the other AD carries.
Do you think that he could have success still playing AD today?
Um, yeah, I think so. He's just a very talented player. I'm sure he could do just as well as AD as he does top.
Um, Also, another player who was on Meat Playground for a while was Atlanta. Did you ever get a chance to play with him?
No, I don't think Atlanta was. No, he was not on when I joined. It was just NK Inc, X Hazard, and Lemon God were the other three.
Could you talk about those three players? Because they've all had like some degree of notoriety, but they're not really as well known today.
Well, X Hazard, he got his stardom from subbing for CLG at one point. But after that tournament, he really just kind of faded away. I'm not sure what he was doing. And it's the same thing for Lemon God. He didn't really do anything afterwards. NK Inc, obviously, he joined Velocity and he joined the LCS. So that's what happened with those three players.
One thing I did want to ask about was that you mentioned that Meat Playground used players like Pobelter and Altec, who ended up being too young, and you guys had to step in for them. What is your thought on teams like using players who you have to sub away once the qualifier starts. Like a similar situation happened in the EU promos with Cloud9 Eclipse and NIP.
Well, it's a bit difficult because if you know a player is really, really good, even though they're young, you really want to keep them on. But it turns out to be a disadvantage because you can't use them for the relegation matches. So it's just something that teams have to they either have to sacrifice not using them so they can play better at this point. But yeah,
How involved were Pobelter and Altic with the team after they stepped down, or did they just like kind of disappear?
they just they just stepped down and they didn't really they talked to us sometimes, but that was about it.
Um, after Meet Playground, you went on to play on a team called Fidelis, or were the teams
Yeah.
in between?
There was one team in between. I kind of made it with friends. We got knocked out by Team Salad Bar in the relegations, and that was it after that. And then yeah, I stepped in for Fidelis. They had Biorose before, but he ended up leaving them to play for Velocity, so I ended up stepping in and substituting again for the next relegations.
Um, who was on this Fidelis lineup?
Let's see, it was Nico 44, Tsunami. What was the bot lane? It was Virus and Profit bot lane.
Prophet, formerly of Cognitive Gaming.
I don't think Profit was on Cognitive. Profit's
Oh,
just a high elo solo queue player.
okay. None of those players are like really well known. Do you think the team was like? Do you think it was like a strong team? Like, are some of these players underrated?
Not really. It was just a team that got to relegations, and I just subbed in for them.
Something I wanted to ask was that if you look at teams back then, they weren't like, for example, there were teams like, I guess, like Azure Cats or like Double Buff. Like some of these teams, like you heard the names, but you didn't really know like who was on the rosters. Like, were there any teams around that time period that were really good that just didn't get the chance to qualify?
I think Salad Bar was really, really good. It was their first lane, and they lost to Velocity, but they put up a good fight. I think if they sticked around, they would have been a really good team.
Was this the team with E Honda mid?
Salad Bar, yeah.
Uh, he was a player who was talked about for a while back then. Do you think he'd be successful today if he kept on playing?
Actually, he plays like Goldfields and stuff like that every month just for some cash, and I actually subbed for they call him Normal Stars now, and I subbed for him, and he's still really good. He's very vocal and communicative, so. But I think he's doing college, so he doesn't really have the time to be full on.
Um, so then after this, you moved on to play for TBD. Is this true, or were there teams in between that once again like kind of?
Well, I tried to make a team called the Dojo, and we had everyone name changes like Samurai, Arthelon, Samurai. I think it was Low Pally. It was fun, but I had to make a decision either to stay with them or to try out for FX Open. So I chose to FX Open, and I think we would have, made a name for ourselves, but I left kind of really early on. So
Who else was on that team other than yourself and Lopali?
we had Grim Samurai, and then we had Turtle Dunks. He was a jungler. He helps with the Potato Monster top 5 plays or whatever. And then we had Geronimo, who's a big time streamer now, I guess, and then Low Pally, who's on Low Pro right now.
Okay. Speaking of this, Grim Samurai came back to play for the Cognitive lineup. I think. Could you give me some thoughts on that player?
Grim Samurai is a really, really good friend of mine. We duo almost every day. We like to have fun around in solo queue, and we're known for messing around with Skara when he streams. And he's actually a really good player, but I think he's kind of done with professional league.
So now we've come to your time on TBD when you first, when you made the biggest name for yourself. How'd you come to get onto the team? Like, what was the trial process like?
Well, they're currently trying to get a support player and a mid player, and during that time, we actually scrimmed them a lot with the dojo. And I usually did really well against the people they're trying out for mid lane. So I ended up just talking to the manager, which was Ann at the time, and she was like, "Yeah, come try out." And then I tried out like one day, and after that, I was on the team.
Could you give me some thoughts on your teammates at the time? Back then, the lineup contained Nidus Remain as well, right?
Yeah, it was Nidus Remain, Heaven Time, West Rice, and Robert.
Could you talk a bit about that lineup?
Well, I think the lineup was really good. We had, we won MLG Anaheim with that lineup, but unfortunately, we kind of fell off, and we had to replay. Or Nidus decided to leave for GGLA, and then we ended up replacing Heaven Time with Broken Shard. But I really liked the roster, and it was a lot of fun with them guys.
Could you talk a little bit about Heaven Time?
Uh, well, the jungle kind of shifted out of the meta of these farm heavy junglers such as like Nasus and Zac, and more to aggressive style. And we had to micromanage Heaven Time a lot, and we didn't really have the resources for it. So we needed a jungler that was independent and could make calls themselves instead of us telling them where to go.
And then could you talk about so there was a brief time period where yourself and Nidus left the team before coming back. Could you talk a little bit about that, like what happened?
Yeah, after our loss to Complexity at PAX, they decided to bench me. And during that time, I actually sort of joined Denial, but they ended up not having any mid laners that were better than me, so I just joined back in, and then Nidus left for GGLA for his own reasons, and we picked up Dub.
So that was the lineup which ended up participating in the qualifiers.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about your match against EG? I think a lot of people considered like a somewhat shocking defeat when you guys went down 3-0.
Yeah, we had a really, really poor performance. I think everybody just did not play to their potential. And we're kind of dealing with some things before, but I don't want to make excuses, of course. But we had to be in the process of like getting new management in, removing Anne, which caused a bunch of drama. And I think we weren't as well prepared as we should have been because of that. But I don't want to blame it on that. We just played very poorly. It didn't show up.
And then I wanted to ask a few questions about what the team dynamic on Determined Gaming was like. When I interviewed Broken Shard, he said that the team required a lot of micro on you to succeed. Is this true, or would you agree with that?
I wouldn't say that. It was just me and him worked well together, and it usually was him telling me what to do instead of me directing him. And I'm a good follower. I will do whatever someone else says. So
A lot of lineups usually have the mid laner directing the jungler. Do you think that this like kind of inverted situation is good? Like, do you think that that could succeed?
I think it just depends really on your team dynamic. It's just is your jungler a good strong shot caller and a good voice, or is it your mid laner? It just depends really.
Um, Another thing I wanted to ask about was you often would swap mid and top with Westrice. Like for example, in the promotionals, we saw you go in window top lane, so Westrice could play Kha'Zix mid. Could you tell us a bit about how those strategies were developed?
Oh yeah, back then it was usually 1v2 top, and I was just for some reason really comfortable on these tanky top laners that just went 1v2, and I just felt really comfortable on them. And Westeros would be playing these assassins or really weird picks like Talon or Akali mid, and he'd usually do pretty well. So we were pretty fine with just swapping, and teams didn't expect it, and they didn't ban accordingly to it. So it usually gave us a really big advantage when we swapped.
So then, do you think this strategy could continue working like to this day? Like I think that Dignitas also experimented with this for a while, but the whole like your solo laners can swap like hype kind of died out. Do you think that it still works?
Yeah, that kind of died out a lot. You don't really see any mid laners swapping. It's usually always mid 1v1 now. But for me and Westeros, it just worked out really well.
If you were to reform a team, would you consider implementing these top mid swap strategies?
Well, the meta's not really into that right now. You can't really get these like really weird mid picks anymore. It's just pretty standard, so it's not really common anymore. I don't think it's very viable.
Okay, so then I wanted to ask a few questions about how the whole situation with TBD determined like wrapped up. Why did your team leave the TBD organization?
Well, we had to. It wasn't really an organization. It was just a name. When we left, yeah, when we left TBD, it was because we were kicking Anne, and she was like threatening to sue us for keeping the TBD name because apparently it was hers, but there was nothing under it. It wasn't a brand or anything. So we just went to Reddit. We said, "Hey, what name would you like us to be for the relegation matches?" And we decided upon Determined Gaming.
And then my last question is: after you guys left, after you left Determined Gaming, you made a post on Reddit about this. You were like, "Hi, I'm Arthelon. Like, ask me questions. Like, could you?" I'm not sure if a lot of people like. I think quite a few people saw that, but it's kind of been forgotten. Could you talk a little bit about your experiences leaving the team?
Leaving the team, leaving determined.
Yeah, leaving Determined and like, yeah.
Well, I didn't really leave. They just decided to replace me with Prolly. I think it was a good decision by them. It worked out. So you can't say it was a bad decision. And they're in LCS now. So, but well, the original plan I thought was after relegations we were all going to stay together, but because of some things I did during like the promotion matches, they just wanted, I think, like a more mature person. I was 18 at the time, and probably was I think he's like 24 or something. So he's definitely more mature than me, and I think it worked out for them. And I'm not salty or anything about it. So I still talk to them every day, and they're all still my buddies. So
Well, they ended up succeeding in qualifying. Did you believe? Did you think they could take down Coast, or was it
well, they definitely deserved it, but I knew Coast was having like some internal conflict, and I think that helped them a little bit. But they definitely deserved it. They practiced really hard. I actually helped them a little bit. I watched some scrims and pointed out some things to them. So
So then I wanted to move on past that, and then kind of talk about, I guess your time post Determined Gaming, like what happened afterwards with that. So in an AMA, you mentioned that you wanted to play a position other than the mid lane. Is this still something you want to do?
perhaps after getting replaced for being a mid laner, I kind of just wanted to experiment going to top lane, which I did a lot during DG DJs, and I was actually a pretty good top laner, but I decided to move back to mid lane because I knew I was better than a lot of the challenger mids we were facing as Super Team NA.
Over your career, you've actually played like several positions. I think you've also played AD carry and support. Is mid your favorite position?
I just like playing anything really. I just play mid because it's what I'm best at and what I think I'm suited for competitive play. But I love going jungle. I love doing AD and support. So I think I'm just a really well-rounded player.
You ended up putting together a team that you briefly mentioned earlier, Super Team NA. Could you talk a bit about the formation process behind that? Like what ended up happening?
It was just like a random manager at it. His name was Brendan Sarf, and he came and talked to me. He said, "Well, I have this lineup. It's Echo, Trooper, and Nick Wu." I'm like, "Ooh, Nick Wu, that sounds fun." And I knew I wanted to try out top lane, and they needed a top laner, so I decided to join with them. And we did pretty good, but unfortunately, I think Nick Wu left, and then he left to play for XDG, and it kind of just fell apart after that.
Could you talk a bit about the players like Nick Wu, Trooper, Echo? Is this the Echo that played on Velocity, or there's another one with a K? So it's kind
Yeah,
of hard
there's
to
an
tell
there's an
apart.
Echo with a C and Echo with a K. It was the Echo with a K. The
Uh,
Echo with the C is a mid laner, and Echo with the K is a AD carry.
um, could you talk a bit about Trooper and Nick Wu? Because those are players who did receive play in the LCS, but
Nick Wu, he's like one of my favorite players. He's so entertaining to play with. He's so funny and just a really likable person. He's actually very vocal in the jungle, which is a very good aspect to have. And he's actually a pretty good jungler. He was a good player, but I'm not sure what he was doing after, or he left for XCG. I'm not sure what he's doing after that.
and then Trooper swapped from mid to AD for
From 80 to
complexity.
mid.
Oh, and then he swapped back for you guys, and
Yeah.
then he also went top when you and him
Oh,
swapped
yeah,
lanes,
yeah.
right?
Well, he was trying to learn mid lane, and I think in the end, when we went to the Coke League, we thought it'd just be better for me to like go to mid lane because I was like smashing people whenever I went mid, and he was fine on going Mindo or Shyvana top. It was pretty easy for him. So we just decided to switch like last minute, but unfortunately we got beat by VVV, and it was the end of Super Team NA.
Did you end up playing in the second Coke Series split?
No, I wasn't on any team at that moment. So
The my last question about Super Team NA. Do you guys also brought in Panzer Dragon to be play jungle?
yeah, we brought him on after Nick Wu left, and Executioner Kin also had to leave because I think he was just too busy with college and whatnot. So he decided just to focus on that, and I don't even remember our new support's name.
Um, Pants received a lot of hype for his Evelyn play. Was this like something that you guys knew picking him up or?
I didn't really know much about him after we picked him up. It's just he's a pretty good player. He plays like a lot of Wukong, and his Evelyn was pretty good. So his meta picks at the moment or at that time were pretty good. So I think he's a pretty good jungler.
Do you know what happened with any of the other players on Super Team NA? Like other than yourself, they've kind of all seemed to have not really had any announcements since their team
Yeah,
disbanded.
I guess Echo and Trooper kind of retired, and Pants keeps playing solo queue. I think he's looking for a team, but it's yeah.
So something I did want to ask about was Nick Wu ended up joining. He ended up joining XCG, but then they benched him again. They benched him, and then like he kind of fell off. What do you think about being a challenger player, kind of like leaving a team to join to go for like kind of like a risky like tryout situation on an LCS team?
I think it's definitely worth it, to try for an LCS spot. It's definitely better than the challenger scene, and I think if you can do it, just go for it. Players can be as salty as they want when you leave a challenger team, but LCS is just more secure, and it's a lot more money involved too.
There were actually several instances of this happening, like throughout the season. Like for example, Sheep leaving Curse Academy also kind of threw the roster into like a flux state. Do you think that Riot should like kind of incentivize teams like players staying on their teams? Like, do you think they could support the challenger scene more, or do you think like it's fine as is?
I think they can improve the challenger scene, but players being picked up by LCS teams has always happened, and I think it's just something you have to work around. You don't ever want to stop someone from achieving LCS status. You don't
Um,
want them to just stay in the challenger scene forever. You want to move on to the LCS level. That's what you're working for.
Something else I wanted to ask was that I was surprised before this interview to find out that you were on Eastern Time. Do you think
Uh,
that playing on Eastern Time like causes problems, like trying to when you're trying to make it into the LCS because everything's located on the West Coast right now?
it depends on like if you have a job or if you have a schedule. If you don't have a schedule like me, you can just play anytime. It doesn't really matter. So
Have you considered moving to the West Coast to play in a challenger team? Like to live in a gaming house for a challenger team?
if there was a gaming house, yeah, I'd probably move over. But otherwise, there's not really a reason to.
So then I wanted to talk a little bit about you spent a very brief stint on Cognitive.
Mhm.
Two pretty notable players that were also on that team are B Sim. He's like pretty known for being like I've read from like some
Oh,
research that I've done.
Beeson.
I've read some research that I've done that he's known for being like a very strategic mind or like a shot caller or that sort of thing. Would you agree, disagree, or tell me a bit
Yeah,
about him?
he's pretty smart when it comes to the game. It's just he's pretty sporadic outside of it. I guess is the word for it.
Oh, what do you mean?
Oh, he's just like a very vibrant personality and like kind of crazy, but not in a bad way.
Um, and then could you also talk a bit about Fabi?
Fabi's a bit of a character too. He's really funny. I like Fabi, but he's also a very gifted, AD carry. I think if he works at it, he'll definitely have a good spot in a team someday.
What happened with the cognitive on him? It sounds like it's disbanded since.
Well, we had like, I think we were in the Black Monster Cup, and we did pretty well after during the tournament. We got defeated. We got second place. We were 1-2 against Team 8, and they're all three pretty good close games. And I think Team 8 is the best challenger team in the moment. So I was really happy with our performance. But after that, it's just things didn't really work out. I didn't think it was good for me to continue, so I just left.
You mentioned that you think Teammate is the best challenger team in the world. Would you include like teams that played in the qualifier when you say that, or
LMQ is definitely better than Team 8, and but after that, I would definitely list Team 8 as second place. I think if they didn't face LMQ as the best of one elimination, they would definitely be. I think they'd be in the LCS right now.
um, another thing I wanted to ask was you had experience playing on the old, like in the challenger scene last season when you were on TBD, and also experience playing this season in the NICL. Could you compare like there were some teams that got a lot of hype but since broke down like Quantic or Complexity back in the. Could you compare like those teams back then to like the top teams right now and like which lineups were stronger or like that type of thing?
Well, if we're talking about the complexity that had Probably on it, I would
Yeah.
definitely say they were very good. They still be, they were just as good as any challenger team right now. And Quantic, they're really, really good. It's just they didn't show up during the Challenger tournament.
Something I did want to go into depth with about that complexity team was I felt that their players were I guess they had they kind of were like more of a strategic team than like one of those like heavy like mechanical outplay teams. Would you agree with that?
Strate- well, they're very gifted mechanically, and they had very good strategic. So they're just a very well-rounded team. I think it was just internal conflict with them. I'm not really sure. I don't want to speak for them, obviously, but I think it's internal conflict that like held them back a little bit.
Um, okay, so then I kind of wanted to move on to like metagame thoughts or like I guess hypotheticals. Okay,
Ooh, I
so
love those.
so I wanted to start by metagame thoughts. You're known for playing some pretty unusual picks, so I thought I could ask and you could talk about I guess their viability or such like stuff like
Uh
that.
huh.
Well, like the champion that you're always been best known for has been Gragas, and he received a comprehensive rework. Could you give me your thoughts on how this rework like
Well,
came out?
Gragas was like horrible after the rework. Like I played 2 games with him. Like, okay, I'm done. This sucks. I hate Gragas now. He's shit. I'm done with it. But then they fixed some of his stuff. They buffed him a little bit. I think he's actually really really good as a top laner and a support now. I
Um,
actually whenever I have to go top lane or support, I usually pick Gragas.
in actually, in the one of the AMAs you gave, when you mentioned switching roles, someone suggested support, and you're like, I can totally play support Gragas, and this was pre rework. This was pre rework.
Yeah.
So, do you think he was strong like as a support before the rework also?
No, I just love playing a support because you just go so ham, and it was just pretty trolly. But I'd make it work, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody else. It's just something I had a lot of fun with, and that actually sort of worked. So
I also wanted to talk about Elise mid. Do you think that's still something that is doable, or?
I actually haven't tried her since they nerfed her because a lot of the nerfs they did to Jungle Elise affected Lane Elise a lot. Yeah, I just didn't think it'd be worth putting time into. I might actually try her some, like in the upcoming few days or something, but I don't predict she'll be very good in lane at all.
And then I'm not sure if this is true, but on Leaguepedia it claims you climbed solo queue in season 2 or 3, spamming AP Tristana.
Yeah, that was during season 2. I got number 3, I think, on the ranked ladder, and the 2 people above me were High and Crumbs. It was 2600 elo, but yeah, I'd have my Tristana banned against me, and it was a lot of fun because you just hop in, hop out, and somebody would be dead on the enemy team.
Is this a pick that you'd still consider pulling out today?
I haven't really played it recently, but I think it's still pretty doable. It's just kind of cheesy, and after 2 or 3 games, you get sick of it because it's just like it's kind of what do you call it, narrow. There's not really much variation to it. It's just a nuke champion.
And then the last champ I wanted to talk about that is Vladimir. Like your stream profile shows you as Vladimir or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Could you talk a bit about him because he's received like spotty play, but like he's like a very like odd champ. Like it seems like some people want to bring him out, and like could you talk about that?
Well, back when I was in a TBD, it was like my top pick. It'd always be banned against me. If you go watch the PAX games, Complexity banned it against me all 3 games. But no one else really played it. I was the only one. But I did good work on that champion. And then it was just there's like no changes or anything, but it just seemed to not work anymore. So I just stopped playing him. And then recently, when they changed Teal and they changed Distortion Boots and Woda, I think he's back in the meta. I think he's pretty good right now.
Do you have any new unusual picks that you've been considering bringing out since, or are you sticking to the meta for now?
I usually just stick to the meta now. I like to play Jarvan mid every now and again, and he actually got buffed, so I'm probably going to play him some more. I like Jarvan mid a lot. I think he has some potential.
Oh, what's so good about him?
Well, he's a pretty good lane bully because you EQ to people and you get chunks of health off of them, and then he's just actually a really really good late game threat to like the enemy AD carry AP carry because you just do so much damage with your combo.
Okay, so then I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about scene thoughts.
Uh,
So,
uh,
so one thing that people have been talking about a lot is Alex Ich moving from mid lane to the top lane.
is that happening? I haven't really kept on to the most recent news, But Alex is a very, very good player. I'm sure he'll do well in any role he picks.
He's been playing mostly like mid champions in the top lane. Like he's played like Soraka and like Lulu and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on these characters being played in the top lane as someone who can play both mid and top?
Beats seeing tanky champs all the time. I think top lane definitely needs some more variety. So seeing Lulu or Soraka, even though they might be a little bit toxic, is I think fine for top lane because after 6 months of tanky champs, you want to see something else.
Um, so then another thing I wanted to ask was that you've had experience putting together, I guess, challenger teams out of players who are not as well known. Like you've been on several teams with like kind of newer guys. So moving into a position, let's say that you were kind of like a manager or like someone like a brand put asked you to put together a team for them. Out of players on challenger teams that were not outside, I guess, like the top five, like there was like the three teams in promos, Curse Academy and Team Eight were like the best known teams. How would you put together a lineup of players not in the top five? And I guess you could put yourself on the team in like any position.
So you're saying players like even though they're on a team?
Yeah, including players on a team, but yeah.
Okay. Well, if you have players that are just mechanically skilled, usually you have a lot of room to work around that because usually good mechanics will be a lot of just inexperienced players. But you need the right set of players. Obviously, you need it's really hard to get a team that synergizes well together. And sometimes you just have to shift around players until you get that good synergy going. But if you just pick players that are in Challenger right now, the top 200, you're usually going to have a pretty decent pick.
Wait, I didn't want to ask about that because people have recently there have been a lot of talks like, oh, NA solo queue does not have a lot of talent, and it sounds like you disagree with that.
Yeah, I would disagree with that. It's just that at an LCS level, it's easier to look at instead of just looking at the top NA challenger scene. You can also look at the LCS players in the EU or really gifted and talented players in the EU that aren't on a team at the moment. But I think there's definitely talent in NA. It's just they don't tend to give them a chance.
Um, do you think that because in the previous seasons there's also been kind of like a sentiment of like, oh, the top four teams like only will like back then the top four teams were like CLG, Dignitas, Curse, and TSM. People are like, oh, like they're just like trading players between each other or they're like recycling talent. Do you think this mentality has like continued to this day?
I mean, recycling old players.
Yeah, recycling old players.
It's just that sometimes a breath of fresh air is good for a team. Getting a new, younger player and that just spices things up is good. And it's sad seeing all the old players go. It's just sometimes they have tendencies and that are just like old fashioned that don't work anymore. So sometimes it's just good to get the newer players and new talent.
Speaking of newer players, do you have any predictions for who will be top teams after this in the challenger scene after this current like promotion where like for like complexity and like LMQ moved up? Who do you think are like the new upcomers?
I think Team 8 definitely, and then after that it's kind of a toss up because you don't really know of all these other teams that are like forming up and everything. And Curse Academy changed their lineup like every other week, so
Oh
I don't.
yeah. Um, Actually, I did want to ask about thoughts on this is more like moving into like hypotheticals of how to like help the challenger team grow and such like that. But what do you think about like these situations where like teams like Cloud9 or like Curse Academy have been like sponsoring these like sister teams in the challenger scene?
I think it's good. It gives them a name. It gives them a purpose. If you're under Cloud9, it means whoa, they're the amateur team for the top team in an A. So it sets expectations for the players. They can't slack off. They're they're representing a good name, and I think that helps with the morale of the team.
Um, do you think that there's like an LCS rule that says like after you make it into the qualifier, you can't have like two teams in the LCS?
I think that's a good rule for now. I think if there's more teams involved later down, though, they could probably remove that rule. But I think for right now, it hasn't really been an issue because been no sister teams making it to LCS
Yeah.
yet. So
Okay, so then I wanted to kind of wrap things up, move on to like transition kind of to the end.
uh,
So then I wanted to ask, out of all the play you played with like several really like notable players throughout your career. If you were to form a team out of like the best players in each position that you have played with, who would be on this team?
Hmm. Probably Bert for AD.
And give like an
Uh,
explanation of why and like that type of thing.
well, Robert's just really, really good. You know, he's had like 8 accounts in Challenger, or yeah, in Challenger, and he's just a really good AD carry and mechanically. Uh, let's see, for support, I'd probably go with Bubba Dub. He is pretty good, better than any other support I've played with. For jungle, I'd probably go with NK Inc. He was a lot of fun to play with, and he's very innovative, and he tries out new stuff all the time, which I'm into. And then for top lane, I'd probably go with probably Balls, but I didn't actually. He didn't play with me for AD, so I guess that doesn't count. So let's see, top lane. Oh, probably Grim Samurai.
Um, so then, actually, I wanted to ask. You did play with Nidus, and then you swapped. Ended up swapping for Bubba Dub. Like this was a change that was highly talked about at the time, but it sounds like you think it was a good change to bring in Bubba Dub over Nidus.
Well, it wasn't really a choice for us. We had to find a replacement because Nidus decided to leave for GGLA, and Bubba Dub was definitely the best choice. And actually, if we didn't bring on Bubba Dub, I don't think we would have gotten Broken Shard either. I think I would have had to move back home as well because I couldn't have stayed in California that long.
Okay, you guys all lived in Bubba's house, right?
Yeah,
Oh, what was that like?
it was pretty fun. Uh, you know, there's not that much like going on. We would just sit around and play all day, but it's definitely an experience. I think that's worth it going into, and I definitely enjoyed my time at Bubba Dub's house.
So now that we've like moved to the end, like, what are your thoughts? What are your plans for the future? Like, are you gonna stay in the scene, keep streaming, start streaming, or like, what's going on with that?
Well, I'm really hoping to start a stream base going. I want to start streaming consistently and have a hopefully make money off of streaming, but you never know. And for as far as the scene goes, I'm just looking for good opportunities. I might be a coach, maybe maybe an analyst or something, but I think I'm gonna stick to mid lane and just hope that I find a really good opportunity for a team.
All right, awesome. So, do you have any like final words, last questions, thoughts?
Mm, not really, just keep it classy.
All right, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciated it. Thanks
Thanks.
for watching. And oh wait, what were you saying?